Have you ever felt as if something were trying to reach you from the other side of silence? A sudden intuition, an unexplained discomfort, a sequence of events that seem to want to show you something, but the message gets lost in the noise of the mind. What if the universe has always responded? What if what you call lack of response is, in fact, a misunderstanding of language? Because maybe, and this changes everything, you've never been alone in this dialogue. The question isn't whether the universe speaks. The question is, are you listening on the right frequency? The truth is, there is a conversation happening right now, but not with words, not with promises or their explanations, but with vibrations, with repetitions, with subtle signs that echo exactly what you emit, not what you say you want. You are already speaking with the universe all the time, but you're using the wrong language. In this video, you won't learn a technique. You'll remember a forgotten language, a way of connecting that doesn't depend on blind faith, nor on asking for things as if you were standing before an invisible judge. Together, we'll dismantle the illusion that the universe is silent and discover why it only responds when you stop asking. The universe always responds, but through frequency, not words. You might not notice it right away, but absolutely everything that repeats in your life, whether it's a recurring emotion, a certain type of relationship, or even an obstacle that keeps coming back, is a response. Not a punishment, nor a coincidence, but an exact return of the frequency you're emitting. The universe doesn't respond to what you say you want. It responds to what you constantly vibrate. This idea can be uncomfortable at first. After all, many people live with the feeling of being ignored, unheard, abandoned by something greater. They repeat affirmations, visualize requests, make promises, and nothing changes. But that happens because, in essence, the universe isn't an external being that grants wishes or denies requests. It is a living, intelligent, and responsive field that merely mirrors the quality of your inner presence. It's hard to accept that there's no judgment or favoritism in this process, but it's precisely this neutrality that makes everything so powerful. The universe doesn't filter what you want based on your worthiness. It simply reads your vibrational signature and replicates that frequency in the form of reality. That's why when you emit fear, doubt, urgency, lack, it won't deliver peace, clarity, or abundance, because those frequencies don't match. The universe understands energetic coherence, not good intentions. When you ask for love while vibrating abandonment, when you desire abundance but live in anxiety, there's a disconnect between what you want and what you are, and the universe always responds to what you are. And here lies the most subtle and often overlooked point. Communication with the universe happens in silence. There are no words, arguments, or pleas that will make it understand better. What matters is your state. It's how you wake up, what you hold in the emptiness, how you feel when no one's watching. Because that is exactly what turns into frequency, into energetic emission, into a vibrational message. Notice how the patterns in your life repeat, not just in external situations, but in internal sensations. The frustration that returns, the scarcity that insists, the type of conflict that appears with different characters but similar scripts. None of this is random. These are echoes of the same frequency you've been sending for years, maybe decades, without realizing. They are responses, not punishments. And as long as you try to change the effects without transforming the vibrational cause, the cycle repeats. The real turning point comes when you understand that reality isn't doing things to you. It is merely reflecting the frequency you maintain. You are not a victim of blind fate, but an unconscious co-creator of a field that responds with mathematical precision. This doesn't mean that everything you experience is your fault. It means that there is an intelligence operating based on resonance, and you can participate in it consciously instead of just reacting. Many people get frustrated for not receiving answers from the universe, but they don't realize they are constantly vibrating in doubt, in resistance, in confusion. And that is exactly the answer they get in return. Not because the universe didn't hear, but because it heard too well. It heard what you feel when you ask. It heard the hidden tension behind the pretty words. It heard the lack of faith disguised in mechanical spiritual practices. It always listens, but it listens with vibrational sensors, not auditory ones. That's why, as long as your mission is based solely on what you want to change on the outside, without changing what you hold on the inside, the response will continue to seem like silence. But it's not silence. It's precision. It's a mirror. And now you might be wondering, if words aren't what the universe understands, then what is the real language? How do you communicate something beyond speech and access a channel where the answer doesn't just come, it transforms? In the next section, we'll explore exactly that. The invisible language that shapes your reality, made of emotion, state of being, and subconscious programming. The real language, emotion, state of being, and subconscious. Have you noticed that some people seem to attract exactly what they want, while others, even doing everything right, remain stuck in the same places? The difference isn't in the amount of effort, nor in the clarity of the request. The difference lies in the language used. Not verbal language, but vibrational, made of emotion, state of being, and the invisible codes stored in the subconscious. The words you speak to the universe are fragile if they're not supported by a coherent emotional frequency. It's like trying to convince someone with a speech while your body is transmitting a completely different intention. The universe picks up on that exact incoherence and responds to it, not the speech. The real language the universe understands begins where thought ends. It is born from what you deeply feel, even when you try to hide it from yourself. If there is fear behind the desire, the field responds to the fear. If there is doubt behind apparent faith, the field responds to the doubt. The universe reads energy with a precision far beyond words. That's why repeating positive affirmations without emotional presence is like whispering into the wind, hoping it will translate what you meant. If you say, "I am abundant," with a heart contracted in scarcity, the field doesn't receive abundance, it receives need. If you say, "I am love," while carrying resentment, the field doesn't read the sentence, it reads the bitterness. The real vibration always overpowers the superficial intention. Your state of being is the clearest message you send to the universe. And this isn't something you change just with knowledge. You have to descend to the level where the true transmitter operates, the subconscious. That's where the old patterns live, the ones that keep repeating even when you've already understood everything. The conscious mind may know what it wants, but the subconscious vibrates what it believes, and it believes in what was repeated, felt, and recorded with emotional force, since childhood or even earlier. That's why so many people live in internal conflict. They consciously want healing, but unconsciously vibrate the wound. They want a new path, but remain energetically tied to old trauma. They want answers from the universe, but express themselves from the fear of not being heard. Real transformation begins when you stop asking with your mouth and start observing with your body. When you feel an emotion and don't judge it, only recognize it, something begins to shift. Because in that moment, you're no longer trying to manipulate the field with words, but allowing it to see who you really are. And only when vibration aligns with internal truth does the universe's response manifest. Emotion is the channel, state of being is the transmitter, and the subconscious is the hidden scriptwriter that decides which story you're telling the universe, even without realizing it. That's why more important than what you say is what you sustain, what you repeat internally in moments of silence, what you believe is possible even when no one is watching. When these three forces align, emotion, state of being, and subconscious programming, something powerful happens. You don't just communicate with the universe, you become the answer itself. You no longer need to chase manifestations. They begin to appear as natural resonances of the new frequency you're vibrating. But how do you activate this language consciously? How do you begin to speak to the universe from a more authentic, vibrational, and deep place? In the next section, we'll explore 5 practical and true ways to communicate with the universe, not through effort, but through presence. The 5 ways to talk to the universe for real. Talking to the universe is not about saying the right words or repeating set phrases in the hope that something magical will happen. It's about emitting coherently what you truly are. Every thought you hold with emotion, every intention you carry with presence, every internal state you allow yourself to inhabit, all of this is already communicating with the field. What changes is the clarity, the surrender, and the awareness with which you engage in this communication. There are authentic, almost forgotten ways of talking to the universe, and they all have something in common. They don't come from trying to convince, but from the decision to align. Prayer, for example, doesn't need to be a desperate plea for something that's missing. It can become an energetic declaration, a recognition of what you already are in essence. When you affirm internally, "I am peace," and that phrase is accompanied by a real vibration of presence and surrender, you're not asking, you're anchoring. You're reminding the universe what frequency you want to expand. Likewise, meditation is not a tool for waiting for signs, but a space for listening. When you quiet the mind, you're not inactive. You're creating a vibrational vacuum where answers can finally be perceived. Because often, the universe's answer has already arrived, but it's being drowned out by internal noise. Silence is not the absence of sound, it is openness. Presence also speaks, and it speaks loudly. When you are present in the now, without projecting into the future or fleeing from the past, you send a clear message to the universe. I am here, whole. And that wholeness resonates. The answer doesn't come only as an external event, but as an internal realignment. It's as if the field said, now I can meet you. True visualization is not a fantasy. It's an emotional recollection of what already exists in potential. When you imagine something and manage to feel as if it's already happening now, you're not playing pretend. You're accessing the quantum collapse, where possibilities become reality through congruent vibration. Without feeling, the image is empty, but when emotion fills what you visualize, it gains density in the field. And finally, writing is another profound way of speaking to the universe. Not as a list of requests, but as a vibrational contract. When you write with emotion, with presence, with true intention, you are giving form to frequency. You're anchoring into the physical what was once subtle. Words written with soul become seeds in the field, and the universe knows how to recognize each one. These 5 ways are not techniques to get something. They are paths for you to become what you want to manifest. They are portals of reconnection with the language of vibration, with the silent language of creation. And when you begin to practice this with authenticity, something changes. You feel it. The answer may not come in words, but it arrives in the form of synchronicity, clarity, lightness. If something within you resonated up to this point, let this moment settle into the field. Like this video right now and write in the comments, I speak to the universe through what I vibrate. This affirmation is not just symbolic. It anchors your frequency, declares your choice, and creates a real opening for the universe to respond to you. But why, even with all of this, do so many people still feel ignored by the universe? Why do so many speak, pray, visualize, and still feel like they are not being heard? That's exactly what we're going to explore next. The real reason why most people talk to the universe and receive nothing in return. Why most people talk to the universe and receive nothing. It's painful to admit, but most people who say they talk to the universe are not actually communicating. They're merely unloading anxiety in the form of words, trying to manipulate reality from an internal place of urgency, lack, or desperation. And this energy, even when disguised as spirituality, carries an incoherent frequency that the universe cannot translate as a clear request. Not because it doesn't want to respond, but because it only responds to what is vibrationally true. The first major obstacle is the energy behind the intention. Many people pray asking for love, but what they feel when they pray is fear of being alone. They desire abundance, but vibrate in lack. They visualize health, but live immersed in worry. The conscious intention says one thing, but the field vibrates another. And the universe, always faithful to the dominant vibration, returns exactly what is being emitted most consistently, not what was said on the surface. There is also a silent expectation that the answer will come from the outside, a visible sign, an immediate change, a concrete confirmation. But when that expectation becomes rigid, it turns into resistance, and resistance closes the channel. The truth is, the universe doesn't respond in the way the ego expects. It responds in the way the soul needs. And that response is often not an event. It's a process, a subtle shift, an intuition, a discomfort pointing toward healing. And all of this can be ignored if you're waiting for something spectacular, immediate, or predictable. Another reason why communication with the universe seems to fail lies in the incoherence between speech and state of being. The person claims to trust, but is constantly trying to control. Says they surrender, but keeps checking all the time to see if something has changed. Declares they are at peace, but any small delay causes them to collapse internally. And this reveals something important. The universe responds to real vibration, not to the mental narrative you've built about yourself. And there's still a deeper factor. Many are trying to communicate with the universe from an identity that is no longer true. They try to manifest a new life from old wounds, inherited patterns, programming that was absorbed unconsciously. And while that foundation is not redefined, the vibration keeps sending mixed, contradictory, incoherent signals. The universe then responds with the same kind of confusion. Blocks, delays, repetitions. That's why it's not enough to just talk. You must silence the internal noise enough to hear what's behind the words. Because if the emotion supporting the request is doubt, the universe will hear the doubt. If it's desperation, it will reflect the desperation. And you can't deceive this mirror. It is neutral, precise, and deeply sensitive to your inner truth. But there is something that completely transforms this dynamic. The moment you stop asking like someone who begs and start emitting like someone who remembers. When you access your most aligned, most integral, most authentic frequency, not by effort, but by choice, the field begins to respond differently. And the answers that once seemed absent begin to reveal themselves. Sometimes in synchronicities, sometimes in a subtle shift in how you feel things. Other times in something you never would have predicted, but deep down always knew would come. Communication with the universe is not about pretty words or complex techniques. It's about coherence between what you desire, what you feel, and what you sustain. When that aligns, reality begins to move. But in order to perceive these answers, which don't always come packaged the way you imagine, you need sensitivity, presence, and a more refined listening. Because the universe speaks in silence, in repeating numbers, in phrases that stand out, in unlikely encounters, in sensations that touch without warning. And that is exactly what we're going to explore next. How to recognize the universe's invisible answers, even when they seem not to be there. How to recognize the universe's invisible answers. Many believe the universe only responds when something extraordinary happens. They wait for spectacular signs, sudden twists, or clear and undeniable confirmations. But this expectation, so common, blocks the true recognition of the answers. Because the universe rarely shouts, it whispers. And if you're waiting for thunder, you might not hear the gentle touch of awareness that's already occurring. The deepest answers almost never come in the way the mind expects. They reveal themselves through sensations, repetitions, encounters that seem casual but carry an unmistakable vibration. Sometimes it's a phrase someone says, out of context, that hits an exact spot within you. Other times it's a number that appears with unusual frequency, like a silent code saying, pay attention. Or it's that recurring dream, that memory that keeps coming back, as if it wants you to look at it with new eyes. But to notice this, you must stop looking for answers where they're not. The universe rarely responds in the chaos of an anxious mind. It manifests when there is space, when you're not trying to force a confirmation, but allowing wisdom to reveal itself naturally, through the experience itself. It is in this state of subtle listening that you begin to perceive the signs, not as magic, but as reflection. Because the universe responds as a mirror, and the mirror doesn't show you something new, it reveals what is already there. When you change your gaze, the reflection changes. When you shift your vibration, the answer takes a new shape. One of the most ignored and one of the most revealing of our signs is silence. When nothing happens, when there is no clear answer, when everything seems still, that's exactly when something is being prepared. The universe's silence is not absence. It is gestation. It is an invitation for you to refine your perception instead of reinforcing your doubt. Because in that space between the request and the response, it is your frequency that's being tuned. And there's another important point. The universe's answer isn't always pleasant. Sometimes it comes as discomfort, as distancing, as something that ends suddenly. But if you're paying attention, you'll realize that even what seems like a no may actually be a redirection. The universe doesn't respond to your immediate desires. It responds to your deepest vibration. And sometimes what you think you want is not in coherence with what your soul truly needs. That's why recognizing the universe's answers requires a kind of listening that goes beyond the senses. It's vibrational listening. You feel when something is right, even if the mind still has doubts. You notice a different flow, a synchronicity, a lightness that can't be explained but is undeniable. And the more you practice this kind of listening, the more sensitive you become. Life begins to guide you in silence, and you begin to trust. To trust in this context is not to close your eyes and hope everything works out. It's to open your senses to realize that everything is already in motion, even when there are no visible guarantees. It's to recognize that the universe's answer doesn't always come to confirm what you want to hear, but to reveal what you haven't yet understood. And that changes everything. Because the moment you stop demanding specific answers and begin to welcome reality as a form of living communication, the field opens up. You step out of the position of someone begging and into the vibration of someone who listens. And there, in the midst of the simplest daily life, you begin to realize that everything is saying something. The question that was once repeated aloud now finds an echo in your silence. The request that seemed unanswered now reveals itself in small synchronicities. And what once felt like absence was in truth deep presence. But there's a step beyond, because it's not enough to simply recognize the answers. At some point, you need to understand that the answer doesn't come from outside. It happens when you become what you once sought. And that's what we'll talk about in the next section. How to stop asking and become the answer itself. Become the answer, instead of keeping on asking. There comes a moment on the path when the question loses its power, not because it was answered with words, but because something inside you changes to the point of realizing the question was never needed. That everything you searched for outside was actually just waiting for a safe space to emerge from within. This is where a new stage of the spiritual journey begins. When you understand that you no longer need to ask for the universe to hear you, because now you vibrate as someone who has already been heard, and that completely changes your presence, your energy, your relationship with reality. You stop seeking signs and become the sign yourself. You don't just manifest, you embody. To become the answer is to stop chasing external proof that you're on the right path. It's to assume, with silent certainty, that you already carry within you everything you were looking for. And this conviction doesn't arise from logic or theory. It comes from the body, from the vibration, from the experience of being deeply aligned with something greater than yourself, and yet entirely within you. In this state, you no longer ask for love. You become a loving presence. You no longer plead for peace. You begin to walk with an inner silence that pacifies any space. You no longer wish to be understood because you're no longer trying to prove anything. Your vibration speaks for itself. This shift is almost invisible to those still caught in the cycle of doubt. But for those who live from the inside out, it is absolute. It's like crossing a portal where questions end because you merge with the answer. You become a field of clarity, of congruence, of living stillness. And the most remarkable part is that in this state, external manifestations happen with much more ease. Not because you force them, but because you got out of the way. The universe always wanted to deliver, but it cannot bring something to someone vibrating urgency, despair, lack. When you become the answer, your vibration stops saying, "I need," and begins to say, "I am." And that creates a field where the universe has no choice but to reflect back what you emit. But attention, becoming the answer is not a spiritual arrogance. It's not telling yourself you're ready while still running from your own shadows. It's the opposite. It's recognizing with humility each layer that needs to be felt, integrated, embraced. It's allowing pain to come without resistance. It's looking at doubt without rushing to get rid of it. It's accepting that the answer you become inevitably passes through all the versions of yourself that once cried out for help. And in that deep welcoming, in that encounter with all that you are, something new is born. A presence so authentic, so rooted, that it no longer needs to prove anything to the universe, because it already vibrates in unity with it. You don't talk to God, you vibrate as God in human form. You don't ask the field, you pulse as the field recognizing itself in you. This is the point where the seeker dies, and in their place the channel is born, the transmitter, the bridge between the invisible and the visible, the living answer that transforms everything around it, effortlessly, wordlessly, without needing to be understood. You are not here to ask for light, you are here to remember that you are light. You are not waiting for a miracle, you are the space where the miracle happens. From now on, may every breath you take be a silent affirmation of what already pulses within you. May every step be taken with the certainty that the universe was never far. It was always listening to what you didn't even know you were saying. And now that you've finally become the answer, maybe you'll realize there was never a question, only a calling, and you answered. We've reached the end of our journey, and maybe you've realized that the universe was never silent. It was simply speaking a language you had forgotten how to hear. It's not about asking harder or knowing the right words. It's about aligning what you vibrate with what you want to experience. The universe always responds, but the response does not come to those who beg. It comes to those who embody. You no longer need to chase signs. When you become the channel, the sign is you. If this journey resonated with you, if something was touched in the silence between the words, write in the comments, "I am the answer I once sought." That way, I'll know you stayed until the end, and that something within you remembered.